Are we live?
Are we on?
We're on.
So when was this? A couple days ago, Quebec has now taxing the unvaccinated. Michael Lee, pull up an article that we were just reading about that. And Adam, you start to explain to me, is taxing the unvaccinated really beneficial to society and this problem we are having with the spread of this Omicron?
This is absolutely a terrible idea. I mean, you want to talk about a slippery slope? This is one right here. The government dictating to you that you must have a vaccine or they will start taking your money. Like, we cannot have this kind of thing happening.
And why is that? Did you just not like the government taking more and more of our money?
No, I don't like them telling me that I have to do stuff like that and bullying me by stealing my money.
With that said, though, 60 something percent of Canadians, a poll was just mentioned about them approving this type of attitude from our lovely politicians and leaders. What do you say about that many Canadians actually kind of approving that we tax people who have chosen for some reason or not to not take this drug?
Sad. It is sad that we have gotten to this point. That so many people are just, I don't even know if they're scared, whatever they are, that they're at the point where they would be okay with this kind of thing. It's unbelievable.
The unvaccinated supposedly are burdening the healthcare system. So if someone is such a burden and our healthcare system in general, shouldn't they have to pay more for healthcare? Like, that's basically what they're doing. They're choosing to be, I guess, unhealthy, right? And if you are unhealthy, maybe you should be taxed.
And where does that end? You know, as I've heard mentioned a few times, do we start to tax people for being overweight? Do we tax people for eating unhealthy food? Do we tax people for doing things that are considered dangerous? Like, where do we stop once we've started down this road?
It's hard to say on that one, because in that case, you're going to end up just taxing everyone for just breathing.
What's wrong with that? The government needs its money to, pay for all these systems that we all want for free. So,
Free?
I mean, yeah.
These systems are not free.
I don't have to pay when I go to the hospital, so that's free, right?
Well, it comes off your paycheck and you pay for it in other ways. It is definitely far from free.
If that is the case, I mean, maybe we tax everybody in a certain system in which if you're a smoker, you pay more taxes, right? How about that? Because aren't we trying to currently do a anti-smoking campaign in Canada here?
Yeah, I've seen that one.
Yeah, so I mean, why even bother trying to convince these people to stop smoking, which we know is unhealthy, but people continue to smoke? Why not just start taxing people randomly for smoking?
I believe the smokers would tell you that they're already being taxed through taxes on cigarettes and other smoking products.
Aren't they also being more taxed when it comes to, not even the tax, but just their insurances are higher, are they not?
That is sometimes the case with insurance, but we also don't have mostly private healthcare insurance. So I'm saying smokers are more likely to be hospitalized for conditions from smoking. So why not just start charging them a direct tax for being a smoker? They're becoming a burden on the healthcare system.
Because that's not how we do things.
It is how we do things. We started to tax people in Quebec for being unvaccinated.
Listen, has that actually started happening, or did they just say they're going to do it?
This is a good question.
I don't think they've actually started doing it.
What have you
yet.
pulled up, Michael Lee, about our Primar,
Leak Spec.
That's what they call the leak spec, you guys. I don't need to look at a picture of this beautiful, not so beautiful, depending on your opinion.
He's got great
Trudeau.
hair. That's what
Yeah, he does have great hair.
better than mine.
But we were reading about Premier Francis Legault. He is the premier of Quebec, in which they are saying they are going to tax. What is the tax here he's suggesting? $50 or $100 wouldn't be significant enough, he's
No,
saying.
I think that is talking about. I thought that was more like the incentive, but I guess
Incentive? What incentive?
I thought they were thinking of an incentive for people to go get vaccinated. Kind of like they did here before.
They did an
But
extremely piss poor job of that.
it wasn't great. But we're still all looking together at this article. While he hasn't had the chance to chat with his caucus about the plan, it's unclear the predicted impact of a $100 tax.
So this is what they have suggested, or what? We can't even get this clear from this news article from, where are we reading? CTV?
CTV, yeah, I was on CTV there.
So,
I don't think they've actually implemented this. I think they're just talking about it.
well, so did our federal health minister, what's his name?
Duclos.
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 Good old Duclos.
He was also suggesting that the provinces start doing this. And we've now had a couple of premiers here in Manitoba, Alberta, and Saskatchewan all say that they would not be taxing the unvaccinated. So, do we actually believe each of these premiers to keep their word?
Which ones now? Manitoba, Saskatchewan.
Jason Kenney, Scott Moe, right? Scott Moe?
Yeah.
And in Saskatchewan, and Heather Stephenson.
Yeah, these are fairly conservative people. They will not do that.
Well, do recall that
Listen, Heather Stephenson maybe. The other two, no.
I don't think they're going to do that to here.
let's just remember, in Alberta and Saskatchewan, they said absolutely not. We will not be doing vaccine passports. And now they have vaccine passports.
Well, that's a good point, and I can't deny that, but I'm still quite certain they will not go this far.
Well, we should hope. And I hope that anyone listening leaves a comment whether they support taxing the unvaccinated, and share this story with your friends, because whether someone chooses to take a drug or not probably should be their own decision. Moving on to something else occurring right now in Quebec. And this is actually occurring because I've seen the videos. There is currently a curfew. I believe it's 10 o'clock in Quebec. Have you guys seen any videos of what's occurring in Quebec?
I haven't seen any videos of it, but I've definitely heard a little bit about this. Initially, I think they were writing people tickets for taking their dogs for a walk and other nonsense like that. It's actually quite alarming that this kind of stuff is happening in Canada. But it is happening, and we do need to take notice of it, because this is not stuff that should be allowed to occur.
Yeah, probably take a quick look on YouTube, anyone, if you've heard of this story, because there was thousands, I don't know if it was thousands, but there was hundreds of police cars and police vans bringing in police officers to enforce these curfews in some cities in Quebec, because people basically, they were walking the streets after curfew in protest. I mean, and we used to think that in Canada we could at least protest freely, but especially in a manner where someone is just simply going out on the street and not doing anything violent or,
Listen, can you tell me how a curfew is preventing the spread of COVID?
These measures that Canadian politicians are taking now to attempt to what?
Does it feel like they're throwing at a dart at a wall with random sentences on it and just doing whatever the dart lands on?
Yeah, it seems like it. It seems like they're just trying to control the population to do whatever they suggest.
Yeah, while making sure that they pit vaccinated people against unvaccinated people,
so
to keep
according
us
to
divided.
what I'm reading here is the Montreal Gazette. Michael Lee, scan it. Zoom it up for me, please. Thank you. Quebec plans to lift curfew on Monday, report. The Go government believes that the peak of the Omicron wave of the coronavirus has been reached. Really? I mean, that's likely. They had suggested that the Omicron variant would peak quite rapidly and quite high, and then probably drop just as quickly. Do you really believe, you guys, that the premier here is using this as a scapegoat for his terrible policy that we're discussing, the curfew, and he's just dropping it now because of protesting?
Of course. It gives them an out. He can come out of it going, essentially, oh, I listened to you guys and I did what you wanted. And then he'll just hope that enough people forget that it was totally baseless to implement it in the first place.
So, having a voice in our current political system is a matter of simply taking 5 minutes to write an email to your MLA or MP or even city councilor if you don't like what they are doing, and actually telling them. I don't know how many people that are out there like actually agree with some of the things that are said, but regardless, I mean,
Well, apparently they're out there, the people that do agree with some of these rather extreme
and they are
measures.
the ones probably that people are listening to. Is we need to speak up. If you definitely disagree with someone, take the time to make your voice heard, because these policies are going to continue and get worse, I think.
Well,
If
yeah.
nobody has even the littlest opposition, will cause pause for somebody to actually listen to reason.
Yeah, it definitely seems like they do not really have any particular plan to deal with the situation, and we just have random ideas being implemented in an attempt to make it look like something is being done. But really, if you take a step back and look at some of this stuff being done across the country, it's mind-blowing and ridiculous, and nobody is bothering to tie it to any sort of data that supports how it could help or if it is helping.
Yeah, initially we were all trying to stop the spread. That was for how long the plan to prevent people from getting sick and prevent the hospital system from collapsing under the pressure of massive influx of patients in hospitals. Okay,
It was a worthy goal.
it was a worthy goal, but what did we recently hear from the Minister of Health? Is
Dr. Atwell?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Jazz Atwell.
What does he say? Michael Lee, did you pull up that article we were talking about?
I am pulling it up now as you guys speak.
All Manitobans highly likely to be exposed to COVID-19 in coming weeks, health officials say.
Exposed, not necessarily infected. That's important.
Yes, please. Yeah, we need to make sure to differentiate that.
How many of us have been exposed to a person that has had the COVID-19? Me. Have you guys seen anybody with the virus, or known anybody at least?
Yeah, I can think of a couple people that
were possibly infected while you spoke to them, or just them?
infected while in close contact with them, not realizing that they were sick already, or just in the industry that I work in, unfortunately, talking to people that end up coming back saying, "Oh, hey," or calling in saying, "Hey, I tested for positive, so just kind of a heads up for you guys." So,
Well, that's basically what this Jazz Atwell is saying, that everyone will be exposed to someone or that has the virus, and with that being the case, should we continue to be fearful? Because what I'm hearing is stopping the spread is basically impossible with this statement that he's saying.
Yeah, and I think their idea now is to slow the spread, but they came along a little too late on that plan. There's not really slowing it now. There's definitely not stopping it. It's pretty much going to wash over us, and for better or for worse, whatever happens, happens. I mean, at this point, if you're really worried about it, go and get your booster. and try to make decisions that make sense to you. But I definitely don't think living in constant fear and this random selection of restrictions and rules being placed on schools and hospitals and whatnot is the answer to anything. And I don't feel that it will really achieve much.
Well, there was an article, when was it? I think it was yesterday or today, that Manitoba hospitals are at a pandemic high and they are monitoring currently. There's 454 patients in hospital with COVID, I believe. Is that what the article said? Either way, that many patients with this massive spike in Omicron. Is that how I say it? People have been making fun of the way I say it.
Omicron.
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 Yeah. So currently there is a high. I tend to wonder, what is the reason for this high? Is it because there's a large part of our population unvaccinated? What do we know?
Well, from what I understand, one of the things that were said is that there are people that are going into the hospital for other reasons and are coincidentally being tested for COVID and actually end up having COVID as well.
That is why the
But
title
it's,
says with COVID.
yes, but they're not going into the hospital because they have COVID. Not all of them.
Was this just a result of a higher level of asymptomatic cases, and they just happened to test them because they came in? Is that why this is happening?
I'm pretty sure I read something about a person that had a broken arm and went into the hospital and then they ended up testing positive for COVID while they were there.
I mean, and that's likely too. And some of the new data I've been reading on hospital stays for the current Omicron variant, people are staying significantly up to 70% less long in the hospitals. So not only are patients not being as symptomatic, numbers have been significantly less in a lot of areas where the virus has already passed through large portions of the population naturally. But people are staying less long in the hospitals, and that's actually going to be a good thing on the healthcare system because they won't be taking up beds as long, or they're being admitted and leaving. So with that being the case, what do you guys think about hospital stays being shortened in terms of infection? Because just recently we have discussed the vaccinated people's having lesser time in recovery so that they can get back to work in isolation.
Oh, shortening the isolation period.
Yes.
Yes.
So if we're discovering data now that says that less likely, less severe infections and less long-term not long-term, but less long of a recovery time, do we think that this healthcare system is just going to hit a blip and then be back down to some kind of normal level?
Well, I believe one of the other things that came out of the press conference today was that they are suggesting that in, I don't know if it's Winnipeg or Manitoba as a whole, the case numbers are likely to peak in the next 7 to 10 days, which is not that far off, and they should start coming down. As we know, hospital numbers will be a little bit behind. But if we're about a week away from the peak now, I mean, how much? It's obviously going to get a little worse, but can the system handle it getting a little worse? I mean, they talk a lot about ICU numbers and how full the ICU is. Have we heard anything on, just people who are sick in the hospital with COVID but not requiring ICU care? Are they near capacity on that? Where does that stand? Would be good to know.
Yeah.
It seems like if we're not that far off, then I guess it's going to be bad for a bit, but it could start improving. What, 2 weeks from now?
Yeah,
So
something like that.
it's always just 2 more weeks. They've been saying that since the beginning.
Well, you and I both read an interesting article in the National Post by Sabrina Matto. Canada's constantly collapsing healthcare system is no match for the pandemic. To truly move past this virus, we have to inoculate our schools, hospitals, and businesses. What does she mean by that? Well, I encourage anyone to actually pull up this Sabrina Matto article and read what she does have to say, because she's not talking about inoculations as in everybody going out and getting triple boosters and quadruple boosters and 6-time boosters. What she's saying here is the Canadian healthcare system, unfortunately, is rather weak. I think I've read it's like 30th or 38th or something like that in terms of healthcare systems in across the world. But what she's saying is this crisis won't end basically because we've all got boosted and we've all had this virus. We've seen many times in the last 20 something years consistent calls for more infrastructure in the healthcare system, constantly asking for more nurses and other specialists. We've seen some governments try to take different approaches to streamlining healthcare in terms of having specific specialists in certain hospitals and emergency care being routed in this province to specific hospitals. To some people's disbelief that we would shut down healthcare systems, but the NDP, was it the NDP? Yeah, the previous NDP government did a study on the healthcare system in Manitoba, and the current government, under the previous premier enacted parts of that study rather poorly. I think we've agreed.
Mm-hmm.
But has it been to the detriment of actual healthcare? Have you, Adam, read up on in the last few years? Has some of these changes been detrimental to our healthcare, or have they been somewhat beneficial?
Which changes specifically?
Well, the specialized training and doctors in specific hospitals and the closing of emergency and trying to open more urgent care.
Okay. Yeah, no, I know what you're referring to. I definitely think that was a plan that has likely improved some aspects of it, or at least would have if the pandemic didn't come along and blow everything up. Now, they absolutely went about implementing it in a completely ass-backward sort of way, by closing some places before preparing other places to handle, to make up for what they closed. Obviously, I mean, any half-brained idiot can tell you that that's not how you do it, and you're just going to cause, you're going to cause a buildup of people who are not able to go to the other locations that they closed. They're all just going to be stuck at a fewer locations, and those locations will not be yet ready to prepare for the influx of patients and whatnot that are coming along because the other facilities were closed down.
Yeah, for some reason, we've had less wait times in this province in the last few years. Can we attribute that to these changes?
Are you talking like pre-pandemic or
Pre-pandemic? That is correct.
Well, yeah, I would imagine that was the goal of doing all that. So I would imagine it did eventually start to improve some things.
If Canadian provinces consistently seem more panicked than comparable jurisdictions around the world. It's partly because our hospitals teeter on the edge of a fraying tightrope. Canada ranks near the bottom of Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development countries when it comes to hospital beds per 1,000 inhabitants. In terms of ICU capacity, we count approximately half as many beds per 1,000 inhabitants as the United States, and nearly a third less than Germany. Even prior to COVID, hallway healthcare was a regular state of being in many provinces.
Yeah, and this is the main reason why in Canada we seem to have been hit so hard by COVID. Our healthcare system, it has many pros. It also has many cons. It's constantly run at or near maximum capacity for funding reasons, I would imagine. But you can't run a system like that for ever and just think you're not going to get bitten for it when something like this comes along and the system is suddenly unable to adapt to a spike in cases of whatever illness.
You probably should pay attention to your politicians and the exact plans that these policymakers are having, because this healthcare crisis is basically the result of what Canadians have voted for. Canadians have voted for inflated healthcare due to money that we basically just borrowed from previous governments, and created a system where we purchased healthcare, and now we have a more conservative government trying to actually balance the costs involved in healthcare, and we might seeing cuts basically to streamline healthcare to a system where we can actually afford a consistent healthcare system. Looks scary, because we're kind of used to these inflated budgets.
You're talking provincially?
Provincially is who runs the healthcare. Granted, you did make bring up a good point. Federal governments over the last probably 12 years have been lowering funding to provinces for healthcare. So, including this current Liberal government, so previous Conservative and Liberal governments have lowered the amount of funding to provinces. And provinces are paying astronomical amounts. I think at one point I read Ontario's budget is 80% of the budget going towards the healthcare in that province. So we need to stop and think. The people we're voting for, they're the ones that probably are to blame. Don't sit here and blame several thousands of people who aren't being vaccinated for their own reasons. These politicians are the ones turning the blame onto someone else, your fellow citizens, when really they're the ones making the choices. They're the ones responsible for the healthcare system, and we're the ones responsible for voting for these people. So we need to wake up and realize that it's not unvaccinated people. That's just a scapegoat. What we're looking at is a system that has been underfunded,
mismanaged,
and now we are just...
For years. It's been underfunded and mismanaged for years by multiple different governments. And now it's being challenged in a way that it hasn't been for quite a long time. And it's buckling and failing because it's been absolutely not maintained correctly. And that's the real problem. And that's why we can blame these politicians for mismanaging these systems as being really the guilty ones here, and really the ones that are causing us all to be subjected to these restrictions and lockdowns again and again, while people in the hospitals are needlessly dying because the hospitals are not able to adapt to the higher demand.
These politicians are bringing about divisive policies, pinning Canadians against each other, and basically using certain segments of the population as scapegoats for failed policies over the years just so they can keep in power. I urge anybody to really think hard about who they're voting for, what policies matter most to them, understanding and asking the politicians. And if you really don't hear the answers that you want from the specific politicians that come to your door, or you go in here and look on their websites and see what they say, maybe it's a better idea just throw your vote to whatever politician is at the bottom of the card, because these legacy parties in different provinces and jurisdictions, they're basically just getting default votes from people who say, oh, you know what, I'm an NDP voter, I'm gonna vote for the NDP because they never failed me before. But you know what, how many times have they been in power in your province, and what problems do you have based on that party being in power?
Let us know down below.
It's true. So what I'm saying is, what do you think, Adam? Should people start throwing their vote away to bottom of the card candidates that might actually challenge the system and make a change?
Well, I don't know if they should throw their vote away, but definitely it might be time to examine some of the lesser chosen options instead of just picking one of the well-known parties just because they're well-known. It might be time for us to look at some of the other options.
There is a couple of other parties in this province, the Manitoba Party and I can't remember the other one, but two other parties. I think next time on our show we might discuss and dig into these other parties and bring about some of the policies that they want, so we can have a new discussion on a new topic. And with that said, I ask anyone to share this video and comment below about the topics they most like to hear. Subscribe and convince your friends to subscribe and give us more feedback as to what their opinions are, and we will discuss those. All right, everybody. That's another episode. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye.